there, I'm Sridhar Rajagopal with ProtoStacks. In the last video, we looked at how to set up and use ProtoStacks enclosures for your next DIY electronics or computing project. I also mentioned that beyond basic usage, it is possible to stack ProtoStacks enclosures vertically, and that is the topic of today's video. Since all ProtoStacks enclosures have the same dimensions, you can stack any ProtoStacks enclosure on top of any other enclosure. For example, I stacked a breadboard enclosure on top of an Arduino enclosure in the project Traffic Light Redux. It is available on the project hub, and I've included a link to it below. In that project, I have the breadboarded components acting like my user interface, namely the buttons and LEDs that the user is going to interact with, placed on top in a platform configuration. The Arduino and its connections, meanwhile, are protected from grubby fingers and are fully enclosed below. In this video, however, I'm going to use the classic example of vertical stacking by making a Raspberry Pi tower. Because ProtoStacks enclosures support different flavors of Raspberry Pi and also work with each other, this also means that you can create a hybrid Raspberry Pi tower with different Pis thrown in. In this example, I'm going to stack a ProtoStacks enclosure with a Raspberry Pi A+ on top of another ProtoStacks enclosure for Raspberry Pi Zero that has two Raspberry Pi Zeros in it. As I had mentioned in my previous video, I usually store my boards in a platform configuration ready for use for prototyping. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and stack this guy on top of this enclosure. So I'm going to have to remove the rubber feet. So I'll take out the rubber feet along with their associated washer and put that aside. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to remove the lower vertical bracing element along with its washer and set it aside temporarily. So the first step is to remove the top plate of this enclosure because I'm going to have this enclosure as the first level of my tower. So I'm going to take the washer and set that aside, and I'm going to do that for the other three sides. Take out the screw and the washer underneath. And now I can go ahead and remove the top plate, and I can set this aside because I won't need it. Next up, I'm going to take the base plate of the next level and place it on top of the previous level, making sure to orient it properly, and also finesse the fitting of the slots into the tabs of the side walls so as to not apply undue pressure to the acrylic and crack it. Okay. Next up, I'm going to take the washers that I had saved and place them back underneath the top plate in the space above the upper vertical bracing element, and do it for the other three sides. And then I'm going to take the lower vertical bracing elements with the washers that I had saved and then insert each one into a hole and hand tighten it. And I'm going to repeat this for the other three sides. And voila, we have our most basic vertically stacked tower, the bottom one in a fully enclosed configuration and the top one in a platform configuration. This kind of configuration is useful, as I had mentioned, when you're doing prototyping with a breadboard on top that gives you open access, and your microcontroller board on the lower one can be protected. But in this example, I'm going to go ahead and close up the side walls and finish it up completely. I'm going to start with taking the upper vertical bracing elements and screwing them into the four corners. These provide the main support for the top, because the side walls can be omitted. And at this point, I have two options available to me. I can choose to leave the upper level in an open configuration. To do that, I would take the washer, place it on top of the vertical bracing element, place the top on top of that, and screw it in, and repeat it for the other sides. And in this case, I would have a two-level stacked tower where the upper level is in an open configuration. This would be useful, for example, if you have a Raspberry Pi that is running hot and you want to have more passive cooling by increasing the airflow. But in my case, I'm going to go ahead and complete the enclosure by putting in all the side walls. I'm going to take the side wall and make sure that it is oriented properly. And as I mentioned in the previous video, the tabs of the side wall that are spaced further apart should go towards the bottom part, and the tabs that are closer together should face upwards. And I'm going to go ahead and place the other side walls, making sure to orient them correctly. Next up, I'm going to take the top of the enclosure and fit the slots into the tabs of the side walls, again making sure to finesse everything so as not to apply undue pressure and end up cracking the acrylic. There we go. And then I can repeat the process for closing the top by taking the washers and inserting them under the top plate and above the vertical bracing element. I can then insert the screws into the holes and start to fasten them, not all the way, and do that for all four sides. This will make the final assembly quite a bit easier. And then you can go ahead and tighten them up. Make sure that it's basically just finger tight and not over tighten it. And voila! At this point, I have a two-level tower, but I can very easily add another level to it. Here I have a ProtoStacks enclosure with Raspberry Pi 4B, and I would simply repeat the procedure. Instead of having this top here, I could just take it out and replace it with the base plate of the next level and repeat the process. There is really no constraint as to how tall you can go, other than the physical constraint of if it is too high, then you might be able to topple it over. And one way to deal with that kind of situation is ProtoStacks, being a very flexible, stackable and modular system, allows for horizontal stacking. So instead of having a tower that is 4 levels high, I could start to stack 2 of them side by side, so I can have a 2 by 2 tower. That way things are more distributed. And of course you can even start to stack them this way, so you could have a single level that has 4 such enclosures. I will be talking about horizontal stacking in a separate video. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. We will have more videos where we'll be delving into other features of ProtoStacks, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button below and bell icon to be notified when new videos become available. On behalf of the team at ProtoStacks, I'm Sridhar Rajgopal. See you next time.